Alright, it's the next morning. It's Sunday, actually. And I think what I'm going to do is sand these square, the edges, and all around the spine, and then come back in with some epoxy and try to fill in a little more. I mean, I'm making a knife from a file. There's just no way I can make it not be a file. But it's got, voids where there's no epoxy, and it looks like, it's not attached well, and I know it is. I'm gonna sand them up and see what they look like. Same thing here. This is Jay's. Starting to think that I may hold off on making any more rasp knives. They're imperfect to begin with, and you can't get the imperfections out of them. Here's an example. Even the teeth, let's see, right there, that piece of metal right there in the center of the screen. And there's other imperfections that I can't do anything about. I mean, it is a file. It started life as a file. And I can only make these knives as good as the file is. And I have come across other files that have really not just a warp this way, but a twist. So they're not intended to be, airplanes. They're intended to be used as hoof rasps. And there's not a lot of effort into making them, square, plumb, and level. So I'm making something out of them that they were never intended to be, and I can't overcome the fact that they were not built to be knives. I can only make them as good as the file starts off as. Here's another one. A little bit of gap right there. And it's not the wood, it's the file. I can fill it with some epoxy. This side looks better. So I'm kind of thinking I'm going to stop making these for a little while, because honestly, the amount of time that goes into making these, my Texas Rumble, the second knife in right here, I get $330 for that, and these take me longer to make than my Texas Rumble. Now, I have spent over a week on these three knives, and I'm only getting $225 for these and $100 for this, since it's sort of a, the tip broke off. Okay, that's the one where the tip broke off, and that's the difference. It didn't break off; it had a crack in it. Oh, and when I clamped down on this, the wood cracked because it's a file. It's not completely flat, and I can't make it flat without flattening this off up here. That's my dilemma. I can't make it good enough under the handles without grinding off all the stuff that people want these for, which is it's a file. I mean, these are 100% stuck. There's nothing, these aren't coming off. But looks-wise, I don't like to let them leave looking like they don't have enough epoxy on them. So I'm going to go ahead and sand them down like this. Sand all the extra wood off. And then I'm coming back with epoxy. I'm going to kind of smear it in these cracks. So there's another whole day that I can't work on these. And I'm really getting aggravated because these are taking easily twice as long to make as my most expensive knife. And, this is a hobby, but at some point I do have to justify the amount of electricity and sandpaper and time I'm spending on these. I mean, financially, it's costing me money to make these and sell them for what I'm getting for, based on the amount of time and, even the electricity. I got to run that AC to be out here, otherwise it's like an oven being in this metal box. I'm not complaining. I'm just rethinking what I'm able to do. I'm going to go back to making knives out of my regular steel because I have far, far, far more control over what they end up looking like. I decided to stop working on those file knives for just a second. I'm working on this neck knife here. I cleaned it up from tempering. Now I'm fixing to take acetone and a toothbrush and clean every little nook and cranny because I'm fixing to go dump it in the acid and etch it. I polished the nose of these up. They're going to look great. And I'm doing three things that my better judgment says not to. Number one, I'm using G10. I hate G10. And I've got some G10 coming because it's the one and only last time I'm ever going to use G10. Even my metal cutting bandsaw, that's a brand new blade on that. And this G10 has dulled that brand new blade so much that it won't even cut my brass pins now. So when I get this next bit of G10, it's a certain color that somebody likes, and I'm going to build a neck knife for them, and that's the last bit of G10 I'm ever going to use. I'm learning some things. And number two, I don't typically make a neck knife out of steel this thick. It's just too thick for a neck knife and too heavy to be hanging around your neck. And I've already heat treated this, otherwise I'd try perforating a handle with some holes to make it a little lighter. And then number two, I'm going to acid etch this, and I'm not certain how well it will hold up to getting slid in and out of Kydex. Kydex is a pretty tough material, and I'm afraid that will rub the finish off. So I'm going to do it, and we'll see how it turns out. So there's three things I'm doing against my better judgment. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you about something just because it's on my mind and it's a simple thought. And if you don't want to hear my thoughts while I'm sitting here looking out the window sanding on knives, and you should probably scroll ahead about 30 minutes. I'm kidding. I'm not going to talk that long. A friend of mine, Rob's Homemade Life, just did a book review on Steve Martin's book. Steve Martin wrote sort of a autobiography, I guess. And in it, he said that he never got his father's approval for his endeavors, his, being a comedian and all that. And I was thinking about that myself. Why is it important for boys, teenagers, young men, why is it so important that they seek their father's approval? When I look back at my dad, and here's another thing, the gift of age, you can look back at things with far more clarity because you're further away and you can see a much bigger picture. When I was a teenager, I really was desperate for my father's approval. I was terrible in school, but I did some things really, really well. And the only things my dad dwelt on were the things I did poorly, which was schoolwork. But on the other hand, I was 13 years old, and I had built my own darkroom with my own two hands. Nobody helped me in any way, shape, or form. I built a darkroom, hammer, nails, bought with my own money, bogan, enlarger, chemicals to develop my own prints. And I had gotten to the point where I had a very expensive, back in those days, a 35 millimeter Pentax Honeywell camera, and I was going to college. It was in Enfield, Connecticut. It was called Asnuntuk Community College, and I was taking college courses in photography. By that time, I think I was 14 or maybe 15. But, I was to the point where I had exceeded all the photography classes in high school, and I was going to college to take college courses at the age of 14, 15 years old. Having built my own darkroom and taught myself how to take pictures and do photography and develop them, and I was even buying my 35 millimeter film in bulk and rolling them onto my little 35 millimeter spools, and I was developing my own film. I was pretty proud of myself. Even my film dryers, I built my film dryer out of a hair dryer and wood that I had found laying around. So none of that was none of that met with my father's approval. All he ever dwelt on was how poorly I did in school. And it was poor, D's and F's. And I had even gotten to the point where through this college, there was a mall, the Enfield Mall. I don't even know if it's there anymore. But back in the day, malls were like museums because people got to display their artwork in these malls and stuff like that. Well, anyway, through this college, the mall had invited some of the college students to display their pictures and artwork in the mall, and I was one of them. And I was very proud of that, and it meant nothing to my dad. I just could not believe that I was exceeding everyone's expectations of me because I was so deficient in other areas scholastically that it didn't seem to mean anything to anyone that I was excelling in this particular area, and I got zero encouragement and zero help. So I sort of gave up on it, and I went back to being a bad kid, doing bad things, getting in trouble. And, I knew my dad wasn't proud of me, and I had sort of stopped trying to seek his approval. And eventually I quit school, I left home and hitchhiked here and there and joined the Army, and I did poorly in the Army. I wasn't a good soldier. I got in lots of trouble. And when I got out, I just jumped around from job to job. I worked long enough to, buy pot and booze and quit and go ride my motorcycle. And when I ran out of money, I'd find another little job and do the same over and over. Eventually, I got over that part of my life. I got through that part of my life. And started, straightening out. And I got to the point in my life where I had quit doing drugs, I had quit drinking, I had become an owner-operator, and I was really proud of the path I was on. And I was making good money. I had a real good business sense. I knew how to navigate the tricky waters of trucking and make more profit than the average person. Trucking is a very tricky game, and owner-operating is an even trickier game because you have so many arrows aimed at you, and most of them from the government, and, trying to get in your pockets for a ticket here and a ticket there, or a fee here, or a permit, or a tire that's not quite up to their specifications that they can fine you for. I mean, it's endless. Anyway, I was good at it, and I was making a lot of money, and I had good contracts with good companies, and my final attempt at getting my dad's approval was when I drove down there to where they were living in Florida now to show him my truck. It wasn't, an especially hardy truck. It was used. It was my very first truck, and I was really proud. And he wouldn't even come out and look at my truck. And that was the final stab in my heart. And it was like this curtain had drawn between me in my dad, and I no longer cared about what he thought. I was successful, I was happy, and I never cared about my father. My father died, and honestly, I did not shed a tear. My dad was not a good guy. He was dishonest. He filed bankruptcy when it was convenient. He got broke into, his shop got broke into, and he had a couple minor things stolen, but he told the insurance company he had $20,000 worth of tools stolen, and of course they wrote him a check for that much. I mean, he wasn't a good guy. I don't recall my dad helping anybody ever in all my life as a young man and a teenager and a young man. So I don't know why I so desperately sought my father's approval. But when he wouldn't come out and look at my truck, knowing how proud I was that I had become an owner-operator finally, and that was the final straw, the curtain. I saw my dad for who he really was, and I stopped seeing him through a child's eyes, and I looked at him like one man looks at another, and saw him for the person he really was. And I think how different my life would have been if I had gotten just the slightest bit of encouragement from my dad pursuing other avenues of interest, like photography. I really wanted to be a photographer. I was good at it, but it was at a point in my life when encouragement and support was very important to a teenager, because there were so many other distractions to get involved with. And when I didn't get that, I gave up and fell into all the other bad things that kids could fall into. And I'm only telling you this because I was sitting here thinking about Steve Martin, multimillionaire, done movies, and he's an accomplished musician, an accomplished comedian, and still mentions not having his father's approval. And that is how important it is for teenagers and young men to have their father's support and approval. I do not understand why. It just is. And it got me to thinking about my own experience, desperately seeking my father's approval and not getting it, and how it affected my life, and how it did not seem to affect Steve Martin's life. Look at his success. I mean, I was successful. I have a nice life here, and I didn't need my father's. When I stopped seeking my father's approval, it no longer meant anything to me that he didn't approve me, and my success was my own source of satisfaction. Okay, I'm going to stop talking about it. I am going to take a toothbrush and some acetone and clean the snot out of this, every little nook and cranny. That way the acid will etch this better. And then I'm going to tumble it, and we'll see what it looks like when I take it out of the tumbler. All right. We'll give that about 5 minutes. And then what I do is I put it in the sink, and then I scrub the first layer off of it. And then I put it back in the acid for another 5 minutes. And then it gets tumbled around in here. What I do is throw it in, and then it disappears. And then the very next time it comes up, I grab it. And you got to pull it out real slow, because it tends to leave scratches on the blade. So, about 15-20 minutes, we'll be back. Alrighty then. Let's just see what this is going to look like. Everything's hard to do looking through the viewfinder. Yep. Yeah. All right. I'm going to epoxy that on. There's going to be gaps. This won't be that thick. Looking forward to it. I've got some Kydex coming. It's digital pink. It's not as, because the pink I have is, oh my God, it's pink. It is fluorescent pink. And it's just a little bit much, you know. Anyway, let me get these epoxied on and get this done, and tomorrow I'll be working on that. Well, all right, this was a very short day. I got the handles on. And put some light on this. I've gone ahead and packed more epoxy in the file waffles, pockets, whatever. So that's it for today. I can't do anything. I am as organized as I can be in here. Yeah, today's Sunday. I think I'm gonna go take me a little front porch nap if it's not too hot. If it is too hot, I have another place I could take a nap. My recliner calls me, so have a good Sunday, y'all. I said have a good Sunday, and today is Sunday. So have a good Monday. And before I go, let me just say this. I've decided 100% for sure I'm not changing my mind. I have one more piece of G10 that I'm making a neck knife out of, and it'll be here probably next week, the G10. And that is the absolute last time I am ever going to work with G10. It's not worth the waste of my sanding belts and my blades. I've ruined a bunch of equipment working with G10. And I'm going up on these. I've thought about the amount of time and effort it takes to take a file and turn it into a usable, good knife with no flaws. This is a perfect example. I should be working on these and shaping handles, but I've got one more day. I got to let these sit. And then if they're still not filled up, I'm going to come back out tomorrow and I'm going to add more epoxy to them. I'm just not going to cut any corners and let these out the door not looking good. So, I'm going up on the price. These are going to be $285. Now, my polished Swamp Rat, my polished BC Special is $285. And this takes me way longer than either of those to make. My polished, I've already mentioned, Texas Rumble is $330. And this takes me way longer than that to make. So I'm going up to $285 on these. And if it means people decide not to order a file knife, that's okay. Because time-wise, I do way better making the other knives. I enjoyed this. It's kind of fun turning a rasp that was used for trimming and shaping horses' hooves. It's fun turning it into a knife. But I really have to get a higher price to justify the amount of time, labor, and my God, the sandpaper I go through. This is like my third trash can full of sandpaper here. And I've just ordered $160 more of sandpaper. It's just never ending. The costs are never ending. I got $140 worth of wood in a couple days ago. I've got more buffing pads because these things, they chew up my buffing pads. I guess because they're so sharp. and I'm going through buffing pads. So this 285, that's just the bottom line. I'm going to have to ask 285 for these, and know that when you get a knife, it's going to be 100% usable, and it'll be as good as a file knife can possibly ever look. And it will have all the little voids filled. Man, I can't make it not be a file, so it's going to have, file showing in the handle, but I'm going to have them filled with epoxy. Okay, that's it. I've made my mind up. 285, never working with G10 again after this next piece comes in. See ya.